The morning mist clung to the Hindu Kush mountains like a shroud, and through it something impossible was happening. Staff Sergeant Kaelin Wraith Voss pressed her eye to the spotting scope, watching the distant ridgeline where 6 Navy SEALs had gone silent 43 minutes ago. Their last transmission crackled through her headset, taking heavy fire. Request immediate extract. Say again, immediate extract. Then nothing but static and the sound of her own breathing. The fog rolled thick between the peaks, swallowing entire valleys in gray silence. Somewhere in that maze of stone and shadow, America's most elite warriors had vanished. The kind of men who didn't just disappear. The kind who could fight their way out of hell with a broken knife and sheer determination. Yet here she was, 28 years old, former Air Force pilot turned Army sniper, staring into nothing while a rescue helicopter circled uselessly overhead. Ghost 6, this is Overwatch, she whispered into her radio. I have eyes on last known position. No movement, no heat signatures. The voice that answered carried the weight of a dozen medals and twice as many classified operations. Colonel Marcus Brennan had seen everything the mountains could throw at a soldier, but today his voice held something she'd never heard before: uncertainty. Wraith, we need those boys back. Every second counts. She shifted her position on the rocky outcrop, feeling the familiar bite of granite against her elbows. Her rifle, a custom M24A3, lay beside her like a sleeping predator. The weapon had accounted for 47 confirmed kills across 3 deployments, each one a small victory in an endless war. But this wasn't about killing. This was about bringing heroes home. The fog began to lift, revealing glimpses of the terrain below. Ancient stone formations twisted skyward like frozen screams, and between them the shadows moved wrong. Too fluid, too purposeful. She'd seen this before in Helmand Province when the Taliban had learned to use the mountains themselves as weapons. Her spotter, Corporal David Echo Kim, adjusted the range finder with practiced precision. They'd worked together for 8 months, and he'd learned to read her silences like scripture. Range to ridge is 840 meters, he murmured. Wind steady at 4 knots northwest. But Kaelin wasn't listening to the numbers anymore. She was watching something that shouldn't exist. A perfect kill zone designed by someone who understood American tactics better than most Americans. The SEALs hadn't just walked into an ambush. They'd walked into a trap built specifically for them. And now, she was the only thing standing between 6 heroes and whatever nightmare waited in the mist. The radio crackled again. This time the voice was younger, desperate. Any station, this is Trident 1. We are in deep. Request immediate assistance. I repeat, we are. The transmission cut to screaming static, and somewhere in those mountains the impossible became terrifyingly real. Captain Helena Rodriguez gripped the cyclic of her MH-60M Black Hawk, the aircraft bucking against mountain thermals like an angry horse. She'd been flying these peaks for 2 years, threading the needle between 1,000-foot drops and enemy fire, but today felt different. The air itself seemed hostile, pressing against her rotor blades with unusual violence. Through the cockpit glass, the world below disappeared into a maze of fog and stone that had swallowed better pilots than her. Storm 1-1, this is Baseplate. The voice in her headset was crisp, professional. New intelligence suggests enemy anti-aircraft capability in your AO. Recommend you hold at distance until we get better situational awareness. Helena's jaw tightened. Below them, 6 SEALs were fighting for their lives, and headquarters wanted her to play it safe. Her co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Jake Morrison, caught her expression and shook his head slightly. He'd been flying longer than she'd been alive, and his gray mustache had seen enough wars to know when orders made sense and when they didn't. Negative baseplate, she transmitted. We have American souls down there. We're not backing off. The Black Hawk shuddered as she pushed it lower, using the terrain to mask their approach. At the controls, she was pure instinct and trained reflex, dancing the machine between ridgelines that could tear them apart in a heartbeat. The fog parted momentarily, revealing glimpses of the valley floor where their beacon had gone silent. Morrison keyed his mic to the crew chief. "Sergio, talk to me. What do you see back there?" Staff Sergeant Sergio Martinez pressed his face to the gunner's window, scanning the terrain with the intensity of a man who'd learned that missing details meant missing friends. His M240H machine gun was locked and loaded, ready to lay down suppressive fire if the insertion went hot. But something about the landscape below made his skin crawl. The rock's formations were too regular, too perfect, like someone had spent months preparing this particular piece of hell. "It's quiet, Chief," Martinez reported. "Too quiet. No birds, no movement. Feels like we're flying into someone's living room." Helena pushed the aircraft into a tight orbit, maintaining altitude while her crew gathered intelligence. Through her night vision, the fog looked like green cotton, and beyond it, the mountains stretched away into infinity. She'd grown up in the desert outside Tucson, dreaming of flying, never imagining that one day she'd be threading the needle between life and death in some of the most dangerous airspace on Earth. The radio crackled with a new voice, older, rougher around the edges. "Storm 11, this is Wraith on Overwatch. I have limited visibility, but I'm tracking movement in the valley. Recommend you approach from the southeast. There's a saddle between two peaks that might give you cover." Helena had never worked with Wraith before, but the call sign was legendary in certain circles. A sniper who could thread a needle at 1,000 meters, who'd pulled off shots that shouldn't be possible. If Wraith said southeast, southeast it was. Somewhere in the fog below, 6 warriors waited for rescue, and time was running out. The satellite image flickered on the command tent's main screen, showing nothing but gray static where the SEAL team should have been. General Patricia Hawthorne stared at the display with the intensity of someone who'd built her career on turning impossible situations into victories. But today the mountains were winning. Around her, the Joint Operations Center hummed with controlled urgency as intelligence analysts tried to piece together what had gone wrong. "Talk to me, Mitchell," she said to her intelligence officer, a lean major whose computer screens cast blue light across his angular features. "What are we dealing with down there?" Major Robert Mitchell pulled up a topographical overlay, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with nervous energy. "Ma'am, the terrain is problematic. Natural choke points every 50 meters, perfect enfilade positions. If someone wanted to design a kill box, this is what it would look like." The general nodded grimly. She'd cut her teeth in Iraq, where the enemy learned to use urban terrain as a weapon, but mountains were different. Mountains were patient. They could hold secrets for centuries, and this particular valley had been keeping secrets since before the first American boot touched Afghan soil. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen emerged from the communications suite, her face pale in the tense, harsh lighting. As the operations officer, she'd been coordinating the rescue attempt, but the news wasn't good. "Ma'am, we've lost contact with the ground team entirely. Last telemetry shows them entering the valley at 8:47 hours. Nothing since." Hawthorne studied the map, her mind working through possibilities. 32 years of military service had taught her that when elite troops vanished, it usually meant someone had been planning their welcome for a very long time. The kind of planning that required resources, intelligence, and most importantly, someone who understood how Americans fought. "What about our Overwatch? Wraith still in position?" Chen consulted her tablet. "Yes, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Voss is maintaining observation from Ridge 77. She's our only eyes on target right now." The general had heard whispers about Voss, a former pilot who'd retrained as a sniper after a helicopter crash that killed her crew. Word was she blamed herself for surviving, channeled that guilt into becoming something borderline supernatural with a rifle. The kind of soldier who could thread a needle at impossible range because missing wasn't an option when lives hung in the balance. "Get me a direct line to Wraith," Hawthorne ordered. "If anyone can see through this mess, it's her." The radio crackled to life moments later, and Wraith's voice filled the command tent. Professional, controlled, but underneath it something harder. "General, I'm seeing movement patterns that don't match standard Taliban doctrine. This is coordinated, professional. Someone's been studying us." Hawthorne felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. In the distance, thunder rolled across the peaks, and somewhere in that maze of stone and shadow, 6 of America's finest warriors were fighting a battle that shouldn't exist. Kaelin adjusted her scope, watching the fog lift in patches like curtains being drawn back on a stage. What she saw below made her blood run cold. The valley wasn't just a natural formation, it had been modified. Stone walls that looked ancient but showed tool marks, firing positions carved into living rock. Someone had spent months, maybe years, turning this place into a fortress designed to kill Americans. Echo shifted beside her, his rangefinder tracking movement between the rocks. "I count at least 12 positions," he whispered. "Interlocking fields of fire, professional spacing. This isn't some local militia." She studied the terrain through her scope, cataloging every shadow, every potential hiding spot. The fog continued to dissipate, revealing more of the tactical nightmare below. It was beautiful in its deadly precision, a work of art created by someone who understood warfare the way a master sculptor understood marble. Her radio crackled with Helena's voice from the circling Black Hawk. "Wraith, Storm 11, we need a landing zone. Can you talk us in?" Kaelin swept her scope across the valley floor, looking for anything that could accommodate a helicopter. There were several flat spaces, but each one sat perfectly positioned for crossfire. Whoever had designed this kill box knew that rescue would come from the air, and they'd prepared accordingly. "Negative on primary LZ," she transmitted. "It's compromised. I'm seeing multiple prepared positions with clear fields of fire. They're waiting for you." The silence that followed stretched longer than it should have. In that quiet, she could almost hear Helena weighing options that all led to the same place, into the teeth of whatever nightmare waited below. Through her scope she caught movement, a figure in American gear moving between the rocks in the valley floor. Then another. The SEALs were still alive, still fighting, but they were pinned down and running out of time. Echo's voice was barely audible. "Range to valley floor, 600 meters, wind picking up from the west." She settled behind her rifle, feeling the familiar marriage of bone and steel that had become her signature. 47 confirmed kills, each one necessary, each one remembered. But this wasn't about killing. This was about creating opportunity, about being the guardian angel that 6 heroes needed but would never see. The first target appeared in her crosshairs, and Wraith prepared to remind the mountains why her call sign had become legend. In the distance, storm clouds gathered like an audience, and the real show was about to begin. The M24A3 felt alive in her hands as she settled into the shooting position that had become as natural as breathing. The rifle's custom stock pressed against her shoulder with familiar comfort while she adjusted the Schmidt and Bender scope, bringing the valley floor into crystalline focus. 600 meters below, shadows moved with lethal purpose between rock formations that shouldn't exist. "First target," she breathed, marking a figure in dark clothing positioned behind a natural stone barrier. 11 o'clock, range 580, wind adjustment .3 left. Echo confirmed the reading while adjusting his spotting scope. They'd done this dance dozens of times, but today felt different. Today, the mountains themselves seemed to be watching, holding their breath in anticipation of what was about to unfold. Through her scope, she could see the tactical situation developing with horrible clarity. The SEALs were trapped in a depression near the valley's center, using fallen rocks as cover while enemy forces maneuvered to surround them. Professional movement, disciplined fire control. This wasn't random insurgents stumbling into contact. This was a planned execution. Her finger found the trigger's first stage, feeling the familiar resistance that separated intention from action. The target was partially concealed, presenting only a narrow profile, but she'd made harder shots. The mathematics of death were simple. Angle of elevation, wind speed, target movement, breath control. Variables that could be calculated, controlled, conquered. The radio in her ear brought Helena's voice, tight with controlled urgency. Wraith, we're seeing multiple heat signatures converging on the valley. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to be now. She exhaled slowly, letting her heartbeat settle into the rhythm she'd learned in 100 firefights. The crosshairs settled on center mass of the target, accounting for the slight downward angle and the wind that whispered across the ridgeline like a ghost's breath. The shot broke clean and true, the rifle's report echoing off the mountain walls like thunder. Through her scope, she watched the target drop, and immediately the enemy's disciplined advance faltered. Confusion rippled through their ranks as they tried to locate the source of fire from an impossible distance. "Hit confirmed," Echo reported. "Target down, they're looking for us." But she was already acquiring the second target, a figure who'd broken cover to drag his fallen comrade to safety. The human instinct to help the wounded was admirable, but in her world, it was also exploitable. The crosshairs found their mark again, and the mountain stillness was shattered by another precisely placed round. 2 down, at least 10 to go, and now the real fight was beginning. Below in the valley, the surviving enemy fighters did exactly what she'd hoped they would do. They made mistakes. Panic drove them from carefully prepared positions into the open, where her scope could find them. The third shot came 30 seconds after the second, followed immediately by a fourth as opportunities presented themselves. But with each muzzle flash, she was revealing her own position. The enemy wasn't stupid, they'd figure out where the shots were coming from, and then this ridge would become the most dangerous place on Earth. She had minutes, maybe less, before return fire started raining down on their position. "Pack it up," she ordered Echo. "We're about to have company." As if summoned by her words, the first mortar round exploded 200 meters to their left, showering them with stone fragments, and proving that whoever was running this show had resources beyond small arms and determination. They were fighting someone who understood American doctrine, American equipment, and American tactics. Time to show them what one American sniper could do when the gloves came off. The Black Hawk shuddered through another thermal updraft as Helena fought to maintain position above the valley. Through the cockpit windscreen, she could see muzzle flashes winking like deadly fireflies in the rocks below, each one representing another second that 6 warriors remained trapped in hell. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, but her mind was calculating angles, distances, and the rapidly shrinking window of opportunity. "Storm 1-1, this is Baseplate," the radio crackled with unwelcome news. "Intel reports possible SAM sites in your area. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance." Helena's jaw clenched as she keyed the mic. "Negative, Baseplate, we have Americans in contact. We're staying." Morrison shot her a look that mixed admiration with concern. He'd been flying combat missions since before she was born, and he could read the signs. The young captain was walking the razor's edge between courage and recklessness, but sometimes that edge was exactly where heroes lived. In the cabin behind them, Martinez had his M240H trained on the valley floor, tracking targets that flickered in and out of cover like ghosts. His crew chief training had taught him to see patterns in chaos, and what he saw below made his blood run cold. The enemy movement was too coordinated, too professional. Someone down there knew exactly how American rescue operations worked. "Chief, I'm seeing prepared positions at grid 27489, Martinez reported. "Looks like they've been planning this party for a while." Helena processed the information while adjusting their orbit to stay outside effective small arms range. Through her headset, she could hear Wraith's rifle speaking its deadly language, each shot precisely placed to buy precious seconds for the trapped SEALs. But even the best sniper couldn't hold off an entire company of enemy fighters indefinitely. The radio suddenly exploded with frantic chatter from the valley floor. Any station, this is Trident 3. We have wounded, multiple wounded. Need immediate extraction." The voice belonged to Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, and Helena could hear the desperation bleeding through his professional composure. SEALs didn't panic, didn't break, didn't quit, but they did bleed, and right now they were bleeding out in a kill box designed specifically for them. She pushed the Black Hawk lower, using the terrain to mask their approach while Morrison worked the radios, coordinating with the forward air controller. The fog had mostly lifted now, revealing the full scope of the tactical nightmare below. The valley was a masterpiece of defensive positioning, every rock and shadow carefully placed to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones. "Ma'am," Morrison's voice carried 30 years of combat experience, "this isn't random. Someone's been studying our playbook." Through the windscreen, she watched another muzzle flash from Wraith's position, followed immediately by the explosion of a mortar round dangerously close to the ridge. The sniper was buying them time with her life, trading her position for the chance to keep 6 SEALs breathing. Helena made the decision that would define the rest of her military career. "Martinez, prep for fast rope insertion. We're going in hot." The silence on the intercom lasted exactly 3 heartbeats before Morrison responded. "Roger that, Captain. Let's bring our boys home." Below them, the mountains waited with ancient patience, and somewhere in their shadows, 6 warriors fought to survive another day in an endless war that had already claimed too much. The fast rope deployment from a Black Hawk in contested airspace was one of the most dangerous maneuvers in military aviation, and Helena was about to attempt it while under fire from an unknown number of enemy combatants. The helicopter bucked and rolled as she fought to maintain a stable hover 50 feet above the valley floor, close enough for the rescue team to reach the ground, low enough to present a perfect target for anyone with basic marksmanship skills. Master Chief Petty Officer David Bull Jackson clipped into the fast rope with movements that spoke of 1,000 training repetitions and a dozen real-world insertions. At 42, he was the oldest member of SEAL Team 6's rescue element, a gray-bearded veteran whose presence could calm chaos simply by existing. Behind him, 5 more SEALs prepared to follow him into whatever hell waited below. 60 seconds, Helena announced over the intercom, her voice steady despite the aircraft shaking like a paint mixer. Through the windscreen, she could see muzzle flashes strobing from multiple positions, but Wraith's precise fire was keeping the enemy's heads down. For now. Jackson looked down at the kill zone below, his tactical mind automatically cataloging fields of fire, cover positions, and escape routes. The trapped SEALs were pinned behind a cluster of boulders approximately 200 meters from the proposed insertion point, close enough to reach, far enough to require a running gunfight across open ground. "Remember," he called to his team, "we go in fast, link up with Trident Element and get everyone to the extract LZ. Simple plan, complex execution, just like training except the bullets are real." The team nodded with the calm professionalism of men who'd done this before. Petty Officer First Class Ryan Reaper Davis chambered around in his MK-18, while Chief Petty Officer Louis Ghost Morneau checked his medical kit for the 3rd time. They were the tip of America's spear, the men who rescued the rescuers when everything went sideways. Helena's voice crackled through their headsets. 30 seconds. LZ is hot, say again, LZ is hot. Jackson looked down at the rocky ground that was about to become their new office. Somewhere in those shadows, an enemy force that had planned this operation for months was waiting to test everything they'd learned against America's best. The odds weren't good, but SEALs didn't fight for good odds. They fought to bring their brothers home. The fast rope dropped from the Black Hawk like a lifeline to hell, and Bull Jackson went first, sliding down through air that cracked with rifle fire. His boots hit Afghan soil just as a mortar round exploded 30 meters to his left, showering him with stone fragments and proving that their arrival had been anticipated. "Moving," he called, sprinting toward the boulder field where 6 American heroes waited for salvation. Behind him, his team flowed down the rope like water, each man finding cover and returning fire with the mechanical precision that separated professionals from everyone else. The mountain wind carried the sound of Wraith's rifle, still speaking death from her distant perch, still buying them time measured in heartbeats and the space between bullets. The tactical situation deteriorated faster than anyone had planned. From her position 800 meters above the valley floor, Kaelin watched through her scope as the rescue team hit the ground running, immediately taking fire from multiple concealed positions. The enemy had been patient, disciplined, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their trap, and now 12 Americans were fighting for their lives in terrain that favored every advantage except theirs. Multiple contacts, Echo reported, his spotting scope tracking muzzle flashes from at least 15 different positions. They're everywhere. She acquired her next target, a figure attempting to flank the rescue team's insertion point. The mathematics were becoming more complex now, wind speed increasing as storm clouds built overhead, target movement unpredictable, and the knowledge that every shot revealed her position to an enemy that was clearly more sophisticated than intelligence had suggested. The shot broke clean, and another threat vanished from the battlefield. But even as she worked the bolt and acquired a new target, mortar rounds began falling closer to her position. Someone down there had figured out the general area of her hide site, and they were walking rounds toward her with methodical precision. Through her scope, she could see Bull Jackson and his team moving by bounds toward the trapped SEALs, using fire and maneuver tactics that should have been overwhelming against any insurgent force. But the enemy fire wasn't decreasing. If anything, it was becoming more accurate, more coordinated. Professional soldiers were down there, possibly foreign military advisors who'd studied American tactics and prepared accordingly. Her radio crackled with Helena's voice from the circling Black Hawk. "Wraith, we need suppressive fire on the ridge to your north. Enemy machine gun is tearing up our people." She swung her scope toward the indicated position and immediately saw the threat. A heavy machine gun team positioned in a natural cave opening, protected from air attack and perfectly sighted to interdict any movement in the valley below. The range was extreme, nearly 900 meters at a severe downward angle, but the target was stationary and the need was immediate. Echo, range 900, target cave mouth, wind 8 knots northwest. "Confirmed," came the reply. "That's a hell of a shot." She settled behind the rifle, feeling that familiar marriage of mind and weapon that had made her legend. The crosshairs found the narrow opening where muzzle flashes strobed like angry lightning, and she began her breathing cycle. In, out, natural respiratory pause, squeeze. The shot felt perfect leaving the barrel, and through her scope she watched the heavy machine gun go silent. Direct hit, target eliminated, but the celebration lasted exactly as long as it took for the first mortar round to impact 50 meters from their position. "Time to move," she called to Echo, already breaking down her shooting position. They'd bought Jackson's team precious seconds, but now the mountains themselves were hunting them. Below in the valley, 12 Americans fought against impossible odds while storm clouds gathered overhead like dark wings. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across peaks that had seen too much war and not enough peace. Bull Jackson's tactical experience told him they were walking into a carefully orchestrated ambush, but his warrior's heart told him that 6 SEALs were counting on him to ignore the odds and bring them home. The contradiction lived in the space between training and reality, where heroes were made and legends were born from the ashes of impossible situations. "Reaper Ghost, bound forward 50 meters, he commanded, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "I'll cover." The 2 SEALs moved like shadows, flowing from cover to cover while Jackson laid down suppressive fire with his MK-18. The enemy response was immediate and professional, Not the wild spray and pray of untrained fighters, but the controlled, disciplined fire of soldiers who'd studied American small unit tactics. Chief Morneau reached the next boulder cluster and immediately keyed his radio. Contact left, grid 27350, at least squad strength, well positioned. Jackson processed the information while reloading. The tactical picture was becoming clearer and more dangerous with each passing second. They weren't fighting random insurgents who'd gotten lucky. They were fighting someone who'd prepared for this specific scenario. Someone who knew that American doctrine called for immediate rescue of pinned-down forces, and who'd planned accordingly. A mortar round exploded 30 meters to their right, close enough to shower them with stone fragments but far enough away to suggest the enemy was still adjusting fire. That gave them maybe 2 minutes before the rounds started finding their mark with lethal precision. Trident 1, this is Rescue 6, Jackson called on the radio. We're inbound to your position. Mark your location with smoke. The response came immediately, and Jackson recognized the voice of Lieutenant Commander Sarah "Ice" Morrison, the SEAL team leader who'd led her people into this nightmare. Rescue 6, we have wounded. Need immediate medical attention. We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Through the smoke and chaos, Jackson could see the trapped SEALs approximately 100 meters ahead, pinned behind a jumble of boulders that provided decent cover but no escape routes. Getting to them would require crossing open ground while under fire from elevated positions, the kind of tactical problem that existed in textbooks and nightmares. Wraith, he called to the sniper on Overwatch, we need you to light up that ridge line. We're going to move in 30 seconds. Kalen's voice came back steady and professional. Roger that, Rescue 6. I'll give you what I can, but they're starting to zero in on my position. Jackson made the calculation that defined leadership in combat: acceptable losses versus mission success. They could stay pinned down and wait for artillery support that might arrive too late, or they could accept the risk and move now while Wraith could still provide Overwatch. All elements prepare to bound, he commanded. We're bringing our people home. The mountain wind carried the sound of distant thunder as storm clouds built overhead, and somewhere in their shadows, 12 Americans prepared to write another chapter in the endless story of warriors who refused to leave their brothers behind. The sprint across open ground under enemy fire was a controlled chaos that separated the living from the dead by margins measured in inches and milliseconds. Jackson led from the front, his 42-year-old legs carrying him across terrain that wanted to kill him while rounds cracked past his head like angry insects. Behind him, his team moved with the fluid precision of men who'd trained together until individual identity dissolved into collective purpose. 50 meters, 40, 30. A mortar round exploded to his left, close enough to feel the concussion through his body armor, far enough away to keep him breathing. The mathematics of survival were brutal but simple. Keep moving, keep shooting, keep breathing until you reached safety or died trying. 20 meters from the trapped SEALs, Jackson dove behind a boulder and immediately began returning fire while his team flowed into position around him. The reunion was brief: professional head counts, quick medical assessments, and the grim realization that they now had 12 Americans pinned down instead of 6. Lieutenant Commander Morrison crawled over to him, her face streaked with cordite and determination. At 34, she was one of the youngest officers to command a SEAL element, but her tactical acumen had earned respect from men who'd been fighting before she was born. Bull, we've got 2 urgent surgical, 1 routine. Petty Officer Williams took shrapnel to the chest, Peterson has a compound fracture, and Martinez is dealing with some ringing from a close mortar strike. Jackson nodded, his mind already calculating the tactical problem. Moving 12 people across open ground was exponentially more difficult than moving 6, especially with wounded who couldn't move at full speed. They needed a miracle, or at least a very good plan. His radio crackled with Helena's voice from the circling Black Hawk. "Rescue 6. We're taking sporadic ground fire, but we can still extract. Need you to mark an LZ." Looking around the boulder field, Jackson saw nothing but kill zones and death traps. Every flat space was covered by multiple firing positions. Every avenue of approach was perfectly sited for interlocking fields of fire. Whoever had planned this operation understood American rescue doctrine better than most Americans. "Wraith," he called to the sniper still providing overwatch, "what's your ammo status?" Kalen's voice came back tight with concentration. 12 rounds remaining. I can give you maybe 3 more minutes of effective suppression, then I have to displace or die." 3 minutes, 12 people, 200 meters of open ground to the nearest viable landing zone. The mathematics weren't encouraging, but Jackson had built his career on making impossible odds look easy. He keyed his radio to the Black Hawk. "Storm 1-1, we need you to come in low and fast. Danger close to our position. We'll mark the LZ with smoke and move in 1 element." Morrison looked at him with the expression of someone who just heard a man volunteer for martyrdom. "Bull, that's a hell of a risk." "Ma'am," he replied, checking his rifle one more time, "that's why they pay us the big money." Above them, storm clouds continued to build, and in the distance, thunder rolled across peaks that were about to witness something extraordinary. Helena pushed the Black Hawk into a steep descent that made her stomach drop and her altimeter spin like a slot machine. The aircraft shuddered through turbulence created by the surrounding peaks while she fought to maintain control in air that seemed determined to swat them from the sky like an annoying insect. Through the windscreen, the valley floor rushed toward them with terrifying speed, and she could see muzzle flashes strobing from multiple positions. "Coming in hot," she announced over the intercom. "Martinez, get ready to lay down suppressive fire." The crew chief was already locked and loaded behind his M240H, the machine gun tracking targets that flickered between the rocks like deadly phantoms. His training had prepared him for this moment, the critical seconds where suppressive fire meant the difference between heroes coming home and heroes becoming memories. Morrison worked the radios with practiced efficiency, coordinating with the forward air controller while keeping one eye on their rapidly decreasing altitude. 30 years of flying had taught him to recognize when a pilot was pushing the envelope, and Helena was currently somewhere beyond the envelope's outer edges. "Altitude 500 feet and descending," he announced. "Ground fire increasing." Through her headset, Helena could hear Jackson's team preparing for the movement that would define the rest of their lives. Professional voices calling out tactical information, the sound of weapons being checked one final time, the controlled breathing of warriors who'd accepted that death was possible but failure was not. The smoke grenade popped exactly where Jackson had promised, marking an LZ that looked more like a grave site than a helicopter landing zone. 50 meters of relatively flat ground, surrounded by elevated positions that could pour fire down on them from every direction. It was suicide disguised as a rescue plan. "Storm 1-1 LZ marked," Jackson's voice crackled through the static. "We're moving in 10 seconds. Helena could see the tactical situation developing below with crystalline clarity. 12 Americans were about to sprint across open ground, while an unknown number of enemy fighters tried to kill them. Her job was to get the Black Hawk on the ground, keep it there long enough for everyone to board, and then get them out of hell before the mountains claimed another aircraft. The mathematics weren't encouraging. Statistics said that helicopters didn't survive in this kind of environment, that exposed landing zones were death traps, that rescue missions under fire had failure rates that made survival a matter of luck rather than skill. But Helena hadn't become a pilot to worry about statistics. She'd learned to fly because someone had once told her that the sky belonged to those brave enough to claim it, and today she was claiming a piece of sky that wanted to kill her. "Going in," she announced, pushing the cyclic forward and diving toward the Earth with a controlled violence that would have terrified anyone who wasn't a combat pilot. Below them, the LZ grew larger in the windscreen, and she could see Jackson's team breaking cover for their sprint towards salvation. The first enemy round struck the aircraft's armored belly with the sound of angry rain, but Helena held course, committed now to a landing that would either save 12 lives or claim 4 more. The Black Hawk touched down on Afghan soil with a violence that rattled every rivet in the airframe, and immediately Martinez opened fire with the door gun, laying down suppressive fire that chewed apart the rocks where enemy muzzle flashes had betrayed hidden positions. The sound was deafening, apocalyptic, the mechanical roar of American determination made manifest in lead and steel. Through the cargo door, Helena could see Jackson's element bounding toward them across ground that erupted with enemy fire. SEALs carrying wounded comrades, professional warriors moving with the fluid grace of men who'd practiced this movement until muscle memory replaced conscious thought. Every step was purchased with blood and courage, every meter gained through the application of violence and will. "Contact right," Martinez called out, swinging his machine gun toward a new threat, multiple shooters on the ridgeline. The .240 chattered again, spitting hundreds of rounds per minute toward targets that appeared and disappeared among the rocks like deadly ghosts. Brass casings cascaded onto the cargo deck, while the gun barrel glowed cherry red from sustained fire, but Martinez kept shooting because stopping meant watching Americans die. Morrison monitored the radio chatter while keeping one eye on their engine temps and rotor RPM. Combat landings were brutal on aircraft systems, and the Black Hawk was operating at the very edge of its performance envelope. One mechanical failure, one lucky enemy round in the wrong place, and they joined the wreckage of other.